There were many ways a good team could find itself overlooked come bowl time prior to college football postseason's rapid expansion during the late 2000s and early 2010s. Almost all of these things were well beyond the team's control. Take the 1997 Louisiana Tech Bulldogs, for example. Despite boasting one of the nation's most exciting offenses and finishing the year 9-2, no bowl invitation was forthcoming. I'm Cheyenne Hollis, this is The Touchback, and today we're recounting the tale of how Notre Dame's mediocrity would cost Louisiana Tech a bowl bid in 1997. Heading into 1997, there was no real way for Louisiana Tech and Notre Dame to know their seasons were intertwined. They were not scheduled to play each other, and despite each one being a Division I independent, the schools had very separate existences. But by the end of the year, they would become connected, like it or not. So, how did we get here? For those Fighting Irish, they entered 1997 ranked 11th in the nation, although the fan base was less than excited about the upcoming campaign. That was because Bob Davie had been hired to replace the legendary Lou Holtz as head coach. Things went poorly for Notre Dame early on, famously so. They won their first game of the season against Georgia Tech in a nail-biter, but then lost 4 straight matchups. This, by the way, was the program's first 4-game losing streak since 1963. It's safe to say all was not well in South Bend, but we'll get back to them in a bit. Over in Ruston, and it was a much different story for Louisiana Tech, where things were looking up. The school had promoted offensive coordinator Gary Crowton to replace Joe Peace as head coach in 1996. The results were a dynamic offense and a 6-5 record. The arrival of junior college transfer Tim Rattay would supercharge the offense in 1997 as he would form an unstoppable connection with wide receiver Troy Edwards. Up until this point in time, not everything had been smooth sailing for the Bulldogs. After a 3-year sojourn in the Big West Conference, Louisiana Tech returned to life as a college football independent in 1996. This was becoming an increasingly challenging existence, but one that would not hamper the program in 1997, at least during the regular season. Things didn't exactly get off to the best start for the Bulldogs. They found themselves trailing to Bowling Green 20-3 in the dying moments of the first half of their season opener. Rattay would run for a touchdown with 3 seconds left to play in the second quarter, and this would eventually spark a comeback for Louisiana Tech, who won this contest 30-23. A rivalry game against Northeast Louisiana, of course today the school is known as Louisiana Monroe, saw the Bulldogs again trail for most of the game. Then it was time for some more Rattay magic as he found Edwards for a score very late in the fourth quarter to secure the team's second victory. The offense finally fired on all cylinders during Tech's third game of the season against Central Michigan. The Bulldogs led here at halftime 35-7, and once everything was said and done, Rattay would throw for 510 yards and 6 scores on this day. Next up for Louisiana Tech was a showdown against SEC opposition in the form of Arkansas, who were coming off an upset of then number 11 ranked Alabama a week earlier. Things started poorly for the Bulldogs, who coughed up a pair of touchdowns in the first quarter and trailed 14-0. The defense would hold resolute after that, and the team slowly clawed things back with a fourth quarter touchdown cutting the deficit 2-1. Arkansas added a field goal to push the score to 17-13. Tech then had a chance to drive down the field and win the game, but a botched snap put the team behind the sticks and a Hail Mary failed. After this difficult loss, another big-name opponent awaited Louisiana Tech a week later when Cal would travel to Shreveport for a matchup at Independence Stadium, a venue that would host a bowl game in a few months' time. Just saying. Anyway, Cal entered this matchup with a 2-1 record, including a victory over Oklahoma, although that didn't exactly mean much in the mid-1990s. The Golden Bears here were expected to win this one going away and found themselves with a 34-27 fourth quarter lead. The Bulldogs tied things up at 34 and got the ball back with a couple of minutes left. Cal's defense proceeded to choke this game away with some bad coverages, a brutal pass interference call, and in one of the worst defensive plays you will ever see to gift Tech the game-winning score. While Cal wasn't particularly good in 1997, a win over a Pac-10 side was certainly a boost for the Bulldogs. A trip to Jordan-Hare Stadium to face number 8 Auburn the following week ended in a lopsided loss. It must be said the Tigers were pretty good in 97, even if things were about to go downhill for them quickly. Louisiana Tech rebounded nicely with victories over Arkansas State and Boise State to push their record to 6-2 ahead of another big-time road game in Alabama, this one versus the Crimson Tide during their homecoming. It was not a happy homecoming, by the way. There are two ways you can look at this result. The first is that this was a bad Alabama team during some of the program's darkest days. But entering the matchup against Tech in 97, they had a 4-3 record and were coming off an upset of then number 25 Ole Miss. Either way, this was a massive victory for the Bulldogs, who at one point led 26-13 in the fourth quarter. It also gave the school a signature win to impress bowl selectors in addition to the victory against Cal. Of course, Louisiana Tech still needed to close out the season strongly in order to boast a bowl-worthy resume. Triumphs in road contests against UAB and Southwestern Louisiana saw Tech move its record to 9-2 on the year, the school's most wins in a D1 season since 1977. We should note there was a stretch in the 1980s where the Bulldogs dropped to D1AA, but that's a whole other story we won't get into here. Let's return our attention to Notre Dame, who were 2-5 in mid-October after a home loss against USC. Bob Davie finally put together his first winning streak as head coach, earning victories against Boston College and Navy at home, with a bye week allowing the Fighting Irish to prepare for a road showdown against LSU. The Tigers were ranked number 11th in the country because everyone in this story is apparently ranked number 11th in the country at some point or another. Anyway, LSU was expected to win handily against a 4-5 Notre Dame team that hadn't really done anything of note to date. That didn't happen though. Instead, the Fighting Irish had what could best be described as an out-of-body experience where they played their first ever penalty-free, turnover-free game in school history. This would result in a 24-6 victory. Another win, this one over West Virginia, pushed Notre Dame's record to 6-5, making them technically bowl eligible, but they did have an ace up their sleeve, the Hawaii rule. The Fighting Irish got to play a 12th game in 1997, and that happened to come during the last week of the regular season. Notre Dame had a chance to impress bowl selection committees and really secure a spot in a high-profile encounter. That didn't happen though. Notre Dame needed a last-second field goal to beat a 3-8 Hawaii team in a game that was extremely even. The win did push Notre Dame's record to a slightly more respectable 7-5, which conveniently brings us to bowl season. As a college football independent, Louisiana Tech's options for a bowl game were pretty limited. In fact, the Independence Bowl was the logical landing spot for the program. For starters, the Shreveport-based game had an at-large spot, meaning it was free to take whatever team it wanted to, in addition to an SEC school. Second, there was the obvious geographical connection between the Bulldogs and Independence Stadium. This was, after all, where Tech had beaten Cal just a few months earlier. Finally, the Independence Bowl had a history of taking Louisiana Tech when the side was eligible. This seemed like a natural fit on the surface. What's more though, LSU was slated to be the SEC representative in the game, a matchup between two Louisiana schools, both of whom had beaten Alabama and Shreveport, seemed like a slam dunk, only it wasn't. Notre Dame has historically had this weird relationship with bowl games. For the longest time, they simply didn't want to play in them. Eventually, they caved on that principle though. When they started to attend postseason contests, Notre Dame had traditionally held out for a spot in bigger bowl games, even though their record was usually not nearly as good as others in the nation. The Cotton Bowl, Orange Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Sugar Bowl were always glad to have the Fighting Irish, even if they had a few more losses than other teams. Now, Notre Dame had appeared in some lower level bowls across the years, namely the Aloha Bowl and the Liberty Bowl, but that was under Jerry Faust, who was underperforming as head coach and in desperate need of something that resembled success. Another thing to point out here, an interesting twist if you will, Notre Dame actually declined an Independence Bowl invite after finishing 8-3 in 1996. The school at the time preferred to focus on finding Lou Holt's replacement after he went into retirement. Unsure if the Fighting Irish would accept or not, the Independence Bowl still extended an invite to Notre Dame for the second straight year. The team also had an invitation to the Motor City Bowl and were facing some pressure just to skip bowl season altogether from some boosters who didn't think these games were really fitting for a football program of Notre Dame's stature. Ugh, the pretentiousness of it all. The fallback option for the Independence Bowl was, of course, Louisiana Tech, who, despite their 9 wins and high-flying offense, drew no other interest from bowl games, including the Motor City Bowl, which was free to select any school it wanted and would eventually pick Ole Miss. What did Notre Dame do? They took the Independence Bowl invite and a rematch against LSU that no one wanted to see. In turn, Louisiana Tech was left out in the cold during bowl season. Realistically speaking, had Notre Dame lost to Hawaii or simply not played them at all, this school probably doesn't take the bowl invite. A 6-5 independent in a bowl game just wasn't a good look for anyone involved. And had the Fighting Irish been 8-4 and not 7-5, there is no doubt they find a bowl game higher up on the food chain. The sole reason Louisiana Tech doesn't reach a bowl game in 1997 was because of Notre Dame's mediocrity. You know, it's hard to blame the Independence Bowl for taking Notre Dame. Again, having a school of that stature, of their profile, actually playing in your, let's be honest, your third-rate bowl game, it rarely, if ever, happens. So you can't fault the Independence Bowl for jumping on the opportunity to take Notre Dame. But damn, there is no way they deserve to be in that game. There's no way Notre Dame deserved to be in any postseason game over Louisiana Tech. They were both independents. Louisiana Tech had the better record. They had signature victories. It's just the Fighting Irish being mediocre totally screwed them. As for the 1997 Independence Bowl, it sucked. Notre Dame players did not want to be there. In fact, there are several newspaper articles with players quoted in them, and they're all saying something along the lines of, "I didn't expect to be spending Christmas in Shreveport." Then on the field, LSU was motivated to avenge their loss from earlier in the season. Notre Dame's players didn't really care. They'd already proven that they could beat LSU. There was no desire to do it again in a game that had no stakes. The aftermath of this, well, it would be an uneven few years for Louisiana Tech. Head coach Gary Crowton would leave to become the Chicago Bears offensive coordinator after the 1998 season. The Bulldogs would get a bowl invite eventually, reaching the Humanitarian Bowl in 2000 after joining the WAC. And in 2012, a bit of irony saw the next Louisiana Tech side to win 9 games in a season decline an invitation to the Independence Bowl. Everything comes full circle one way or another. As for Notre Dame under Bob Davie, well, it was no fun for anyone involved. There you have it, the story of how Notre Dame's mediocrity cost Louisiana Tech a bowl invite in 1997. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to know a little bit more about how promotion and relegation in college football would not work, you can check out the video in the upper right hand corner of your screen. Until next time, I'm Shine Hollis. This is the Touchback. #TakeItOut to the 25.